Well, welcome for those of you that are joining. We're so glad to have you with us today. It's just right now 2 o'clock, so we're going to actually start our time together with a short video, just as I know folks are coming back probably from lunch or other meetings. And so as everybody starts to join us in this webinar today, NCF Orlando Impact Investing webinar, we're going to start with this video, and I'm going to introduce it just briefly. So one of our speakers today is David Sims, and he is connected to a biotech firm that is located in Kenya. And so we're going to show a short 3-minute video on a gentleman named Duncan and a bit about his farming life. So Joel, if you could cue that up, that'd be great. Thanks.
Pyrethrum is making a difference in the lives of many people in this village, in Eburu. So I want to see for myself how this transformation looks like. And I'd like you to come with me to meet a gentleman here who is waiting for me at this gate. Habari ya mzee?
Mzuri sana.
Ndio. Jina unaitwa nani?
Duncan Njoroge.
His name is Duncan. Duncan Njoroge.
Yeah.
Yes. Duncan.
Yeah.
Asante sana kwa kunikaribisha kwako. Thank you, Duncan, for welcoming me to your house.
Okay.
Can you show me what Pyrethrum has done for you? Nataka unioneshe vile Pyrethrum imekufanyia.
Okay.
So this is Duncan's home. Ndio kwako?
Hapa ndio kwangu.
Yes.
Ndio mimi sasa hapa ndio nimekaa miaka 10.
Yes.
Na hakuna kitu nimefanya na mahindi.
Yes.
Sasa pareto wakati imekuja baada ya miaka 5.
Yes.
Mimi kushalima pareto imenisaidia. Sasa nimetengeneza nyumba ingine ya mawe.
Okay.
Nimesomesha watoto.
Okay.
Yote.
Okay. So Duncan is saying he has lived here for the last 10 years. And mostly he was growing maize. And maize did very little for him. He has been living in this mud house for 10 years. 5 years ago, he got into planting Pyrethrum. And Pyrethrum has helped him to educate his children. He's able to educate them. He's able to feed them. And he's able to dress them from Pyrethrum. That's what he says. On top of that, Pyrethrum has helped him to do something. And this is the story of transformation. So he has built this house with the proceeds from Pyrethrum. And he's been able to build a water tank and a beautiful house. It is finished and he's already started to move his things there, but it's not completely moved in. So he's still translocating. But this is the story of transformation from Pyrethrum that Duncan can share with us. Ni kweli?
Ni ukweli sana. Ni Pyrethrum ndio imeleta hii maneno yote.
Okay.
Ndio nimejenga.
Okay. Pyrethrum has brought all this that you can see.
Nimesomesha watoto.
I've educated my children.
Nimejenga nyumba.
And I've built a house.
Sasa karibu mwezi hii ingine naingia.
Next month I'm fully moving in.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well done, Duncan. Congratulations. Mungu akubariki.
Sana.
Ni Mungu peke yake. Ndiye anatuwezesha tunafanya hii.
Ndio.
Yeah. It is only God.
Mimi nimeshukuru sana.
I'm so grateful.
Okay.
You are saying you are very grateful.
Yes.
Yes. Duncan is very grateful for what God has done for him.
So we just wanted to share that briefly 3-minute video. For those of you that joined just in the last couple of minutes, that's a biotech firm that's based in Kenya, and a gentleman named Duncan, and there are 3,200 farmers in that particular project, 62 full-time jobs. We'll hear about that a little later. So I want to just make some brief introductory remarks and welcome you. The last time I was reading through my notes last night, we actually had an impact investing webinar like this was 5 years ago. And I remember when I started at NCF Orlando back in 2012, in my first 60 days, I went to a conference in San Francisco. So that had been 9 years ago. So much has changed really in the last decade in impact investing. And we have 3 speakers today that I think will shed light on a lot of those new trends. So excited about this topic today. There's a lot happening in this area. One thing, if you all can give us feedback for those of you that are on, if this is over or through the chat function, we would love to know if you have interest in just convening around impact investing. We have started 2 affinity groups already, one in the area of anti-trafficking. So we want to stop sex trafficking in Orlando, and there's a group of givers that are doing that here. And then we just launched 2 weeks ago an affinity group around foster children. So let us know if impact is an area that you want to convene around, and we will help make that happen. As you all recall, we had a speaker series and a number of things we did through COVID, and this would have been starting in the spring of last year. So we would love to be doing these in person, but I think we're still kind of coming out of this, and thank you for your patience. I know we're all zoomed out a bit, but grateful to have you on today. And hopefully this time today, we have about an hour set aside, will just be really helpful for you to frame out what impact is and how practically you and your family can be plugged in. Currently, right now, one of the burdens I have on my heart, we've been able to grow exponentially since we relaunched the Orlando affiliate in 2012. We have 150 million now sitting in our donor advised funds with our families, over 800 giving funds, 500 families served. And so there's an angst in me that I certainly want to stay Swiss, but we really do want to be helpful in guiding families to areas that they feel burdened and passionate about for their giving. So with that, this is an area potentially where you all may say, I've got money in my donor advised fund and I'd like to invest in these kinds of ventures. So just to start off, before I push it over to Jeff Johns from the Impact Foundation, many of you all have heard of ESG investing. I wanted to just frame that quickly. Environmental is the E, social/spiritual is the S, and then governance is the G. And essentially looking for triple bottom line, if you will, type investments with financial returns. There's been dramatic growth. I mentioned that. Some of the themes driving that, there's changing preferences within our workforce, with our consumers, with companies, asset owners, regulators. There's improving economics, right? So different efficiencies, innovations, and growth that's happening. There's also consequences, right? Social tension that we've seen, increased transparency and connectedness. So a lot is driving this. The other thing that you'll see is you just read broadly about impact investing in ESG, just across the board, is increasingly there's a lot of asset classes that you can invest in these kinds of areas in. So what used to be maybe a singular, 2 different kinds of asset classes, now it's private equity, real assets, private credit. You'll hear a bit about those areas from Jeff Schaefer, fixed income, public equity. And then ESG and impact investing can invest through multiple investment vehicles. So you can invest in mutual funds or ETFs. So just a couple of introductory thoughts there. And then next slide, I'm just going to briefly introduce our speakers. And I'll do that as I hit this slide as well. So we have Jeff Johns is going to speak to us. And actually, this is a slide I've seen from him. This just gives a broad left to right scan, right? Because I remember when I first started looking at impact investing, I just wondered what it was. And so if you look at the very far left, right, profit motive only, 100% traditional investing, you're looking for a return, you want to minimize risk and maximize return. If you go all the way to the right, it's pure philanthropy. You're giving dollars. It could be to a 501c, it could be to your church, a school. It's 100% philanthropy, right? And then as you merge to the middle, you're looking more at impact, right? Where you're connecting both something that you'd like to get a market-based return on and something that has significant impact. So that's just a broad scan. We can get the slide to you if you're interested later. And then in terms of our speakers, so Jeff Johns, I met him when I joined NCF in 2012. He was at NCF for 12 years from the late 2000s, left in 2015 to launch what is now the Impact Foundation. So he is a CEO and co-founder, as all of these gentlemen on the presenting list today are. So Jeff, and David, all CEOs and co-founders. I know that I think Jeff Schaefer's in Idaho and Jeff Johns is in New Mexico and David is in Philadelphia. So amazing technology to have us all connected. I know many of you have spring break this week, so just grateful to have you all with us. But Jeff has lived in Hong Kong, trying to launch generosity initiatives in Asia. He's a Duke undergrad, University of Texas MBA. His wife, Jacqueline, 3 kids, has really helped over the years with NCF place billions of dollars into charitable buckets for families. A great friend. Really glad to have Jeff Johns on today. So I'm going to dish to Jeff, and he's going to talk a bit about what he's doing at the Impact Foundation. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Tim. Really excited to be with you all and to see some old friends on the list. So for some of you, this will be kind of a primer that is necessary. For others, it will be old hat. You know, a bit of my story, I grew up in a family business. My co-founder, Amy Minnick, also grew up in business. And we saw the incredible power that business could have, both for good and the not so good. And then as we were at NCF, and I was specifically, you know, leaving the business world after the MBA to do the charitable side, you know, I saw a need that couldn't be met by charity alone. And that's when we were in Africa, and this woman looked at me and said, there's only two things that my people need: Jesus Christ and a job. And then she said, business has the willpower to transform societies. And so, you know, our tagline, what if your investments could change the world? You all who are part of this webinar today are sophisticated financially, and you know that all dollars have an agenda. It just depends on what that agenda is. So sometimes we don't want to think about it. You know, I shop at Amazon because it's easy and don't think so much about what it might be doing to my local economy. Well, if you make it too easy, that's kind of the way that things go. And when we joined Impact and started Impact Foundation, this was what I would call a relatively small party. It was hard to find product, and it was hard to find people who were interested in what we were doing. And, you know, we were decorating the ballroom, but now it's amazing what has happened. Tim referenced it, but over the last 5 to 7 years, it's a much more robust ecosystem. Still early on, but there are options all across the board. And David has some amazing ones that he'll tell you about at Talenton, and Jeff has some great ones that he's going to talk to you about as well. So Tim, if you go to the next slide, this is the definition of impact investing: investing in enterprises with intention to generate a measurable social, environmental, and/or, this is our part, kingdom transformation alongside a financial return. So the classic impact investing definition leaves out the kingdom piece. But if you're looking at faith-driven investing, the kingdom piece is added back in. And for many of the people that we serve, it's their primary motivation. The families that we serve, really, when you get down to it, are concerned with two things. They want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, after their last day, and they want to make sure that they do a great job with their children on the way. Those are pretty much, when it gets down to the needs, what their needs really are. And so what does that mean about our capital that we stored? There's lots of questions about this. And Tim said, you know, there was a continuum. Philanthropy is how God makes a lot of things work. Business has also been created by the Lord, as we know that work was pre-fall. And so, you know, how do we marry those two things together? So this slide here on the left is specifically focused on charitable capital. So just know that there's many, many people who use their personal investment capital to make impact investments. And Jeff's going to go more into that. And David also helps with that. But Impact Foundation was created out of National Christian Foundation specifically to help people steward charitable dollars. And we don't really get into when should you use your charitable capital or personal capital, because both can be a great answer to some of these questions. But the times when you would use charitable capital would be 3 different times. You have excess charitable capital that's underutilized. So if you have money in your NCF fund and you have it in the money market and it's not returning much at this point because nothing is in the money market, maybe you want to put it into an impact investment. Time 2 would be you need a tax deduction this year. And so, you know, you send it over to NCF or you do a non-liquid gift with them, and that frees up cash to make an impact investment. The third reason why you would use charitable capital for an impact investment is you've spent too much time with Todd Harper and you really believe that God owns everything, and you're totally sold out to the fact that you don't need any more and your kids don't need any more. And so at that point, it makes all the sense in the world to do all your private equity and venture and everything else from your charitable fund, because you don't have, well, obviously you get the tax deduction on the way in, which could be worth 40% or more. And then you don't have to pay capital gains when the investment has a return. And just to be clear, that returns come back into your funded impact foundation. We push it back to your NCF fund, and it just grows your kingdom dollars for giving or more impact investing. So what's that amounted to? Well, if you look on the left, there's approaching $1 trillion of capital that's been given away, but not sent to end user charities. So those are dollars in the Gates Foundations of the world, National Christian Foundations, and Fidelity Charitable. Most of those are invested in S&P type investments. 100 billion actually goes out to charity in an average year. So can we take advantage of the trillion instead of just the 100 billion? And if you look on the right side, philanthropy is one block. So if that's what we're counting on alone to change the world, we need to think bigger. Investable assets are really a place where there's a tremendous opportunity to get dollars in to align with your faith and to make a difference in the world. So in scripture, there's 4 uses of capital that we see. Capital for giving, hugely important part in everyone's spiritual journey. It's why NCF exists, and they're the best in the world at helping you align your family, your values, and everything else for gifts. Also in scripture, there was gifts to support the temple and priests. That's great. A lot of NCF dollars go to churches. Then there's this other piece. We use capital for market rate financial return. And then finally in gleaning. So I'll talk briefly about gleaning. Gleaning in companies is interesting because there's things that you may do and it may not make financial bottom line sense. So a lot of you are business owners. Sometimes you go above and beyond to start a fund to help people when they have, medical expenses or funerals. You go above what the government is calling for. You pay above minimum wage to workers where you could ship things out other places. All of these could be considered gleaning. Now, I've talked with business owners who say, no, that's just good business. Yes, I love it when the Bible aligns with just good business and you can do all these kind of things and still people leave work saying, wow, I don't know, but that company takes care of me, my family, they love the environment, they pay our vendors on time or early. This is the apologetic that we need nowadays is anyone who leaves work from a Christian-owned company should be just so excited about the quality of life that they get in the company. And those are the kind of companies that we get to invest in at Impact Foundation. So who is the customer for this? Most of you who've called in right now, entrepreneurial investors. They're looking for business opportunity. People who use Impact Foundation have charitable wealth set aside, like I mentioned. They have a stewardship mentality that God owns it all, and they're concerned about the next generation. So on this 2x2, the left side is the spiritual and social return, and the bottom axis is the financial return. Obviously, everybody would love to have their investments in Kingdom Impact investing quadrant, getting high returns, that's market rate, sometimes better, and also impacting the kingdom. We also have a number of givers who specifically are looking for low return, high spiritual and social return investments. David specializes in some of those, and he'll give you some examples. But, our board chair has said, we don't always believe that, in Africa, you need to be making 18 to 20%, but that's not possible to change the world and take people out of poverty always. And so we look for investments that may only give us 4 or 5%. Some people would call that foolish investing. But if it's changing the world for Christ, the returns are 100-fold or more. This is where there's options, and a lot of people who get really into this plot their investments. And a good investment is one that does what you expect it to do. So if you expect it to reach 1,000 people and return 4%, and it does, then that's a good investment. And that's part of what we vet for at Impact Foundation. So these are just 3 examples. I'll go over quickly. The hero in the story is never Impact Foundation, and it's not even you all, the givers. It's really the impact companies. These are the people on the front lines who are making a difference. So on the left, this is a franchisee at Mercado Fresco, which is a charity that we make loans to from Impact Foundation, and they're paying back the loans into these impact accounts. They have started a micro franchise, and there's over 150 women now who use their home to sell fresh foods in these really tough kind of inner city ghetto areas where before they could only access, Coca-Cola and chips. Now they have a healthy, fresh food market, which has a huge impact. But also the average dollars that these women have to spend are going from $2 a day to $5 a day. But the biggest impact, and I speak Spanish, so I got to interview a lot of these women. They all say, before I had to go 2 hours to peel potatoes at a terrible job, and now I get to raise my kids and they see me as a business owner. It's just hugely transformational. My time's about up, so I'm not going to touch on the other two, but Pete Oakes, who started a business in a prison, the prisoners now have this deal where the highest thing you can do is send your kids through college while you're in prison. And 5 of them have accomplished it. It brings tears to my eyes what they're doing there. Okay, so this is my last slide before I introduce Jeff Schaefer, but Impact Foundation has been around for 5 years now. Our average deal is just under $500,000. We have 9 employees. We've invested in $184 million for impact. What kind of causes? Redemptive methodology. These are businesses that proclaim the gospel in word and deed within the business, but don't necessarily have anything that fits in these other categories. But we can invest in those. So most of the things you're thinking about, if it's a Christian at the top who is trying to live out their calling through their business, you can make an investment, early stage or whatever, through Impact Foundation. Poverty alleviation is the next biggest category. And then when I go to the regular impact investing conferences and talk about our area of evangelism and discipleship, they look at me very strangely. But there is a lot of great evangelism and discipleship that can be done. If you guys know the Dignity Coconut story, I think they baptized now 40 or 50 workers while they're taking care of many families in the Philippines. Just amazing things happening. So to be clear, when you guys want to do an impact investment, you just tell Tim, hey, this is what I want to do. We make it seamless behind the scenes. The dollars flow to Impact Foundation with 1 grant from NCF. We flow them back when there's returns. And the stories are the coolest part. So Tim, thanks for letting me be a part of this. All right, so Jeff, many of you guys know because he's an Orlando local. I got to meet him on Tim's dock. So if you haven't been invited out to Tim's dock to hang out, some magic things happen there. And one night he said, you got to meet this guy. He's like, you're kindred spirits. And so Jeff came over. His background, he used to be the president of CNL and has a great family and has a passion for impact investing. And so our paths keep crossing, but he is really carved out some pieces that I think you guys will find super interesting and really investable, whether you're wanting to use charitable capital or if you want to use your own capital. This is a great way of making good returns and changing the world at the same time. Over to you, Jeff.
All right. Hopefully you can hear me. Jeff, thanks so much for the intro. And I must say, first of all, I could talk for 2 hours. So Tim, you're going to have to scream. I'll try to go through this quickly. But I want to start with this. Everybody on this call, especially the speakers, and I can't see who else is on the call. It is amazing to think that we're actually on this call today because I can go back multiple years with conversations with everybody here. And it all started for me. I was an executive at CNL back when I was 40, had a back surgery, and I won't go through the whole thing other than to say I woke up after back surgery and I just saw the world different. And actually through Tim and through Todd Harper, really challenged my wife and I, and they probably didn't even know they were challenging us, but it just in being around them, what does it mean to be a steward of our time, talent, and treasures? And so I thought I had answered that multiple times, but God put us on another trajectory. I left traditional finance to go after this whole impact investing space. So we created Common Good back in 2017. And really the idea was, how do we help investors think about what it means to be a steward of their taxable or of their investment capital? So that's really the way we started. And then what you find is what we do can be transferable because these are impact investments that also can go into donor advised funds, for example. And so there's this whole world out there that most do not have access to because it's still early on, it's cumbersome. So we go out and we source and due diligence all different types of impact funds. So think of private equity, real assets, so real estate infrastructure, and private credit, which you're going to hear a little about today. And then, of course, you have the wealth advisors and investors. And what we've seen is that there's this ever-growing demand, and it's changed dramatically in a real positive way, even in the last year. And people want access to impact funds. But if you look in the middle here, there's this Rubik's Cube. This is an investment. I mean, you can lose money, you can have bad impact, or vice versa. So what we specialize is in going in and due diligence, look at the risk and reward, look at the operational, helping people set up funds. We actually have some of our own funds as well, educate, and there's a lot of regulatory regimes that we have to be considerate of. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is funnel impact opportunities or impact funds, whether you want to do that through your charitable capital or you want to do that through your taxable capital. So let me just step back for a second, because we could talk for literally 5 hours on what does impact mean, what does it not, and so let me just paraphrase how I and we at Common Good view it. So first is the why. We start at a stewardship position, and you're going to hear all different scriptures that I could quote in here, but I think we all agree that we're stewards of our time, talent, and treasure. So that's the start for us. Ultimately, what we're trying to create is human flourishing, and you can define that multiple ways. I talk to both faith-based and non-faith-based, but for me, there's a joy and freedom and peace that comes out of that, not only for the investor, but for those who the capital is going to. This coin, which is probably not a great example of a coin, this is something I wanted to just take 15 seconds and talk about, because most of the world talks about impact investing, about the problems that it can solve, which is wonderful. We're called to do that. And you're going to hear all those different themes today. But the other side of this that I actually am drawn to this, and the self is what we typically talk about in philanthropy or charity. But I would tell you, start to allocate some of your own investment, taxable capital towards others, towards impact. And there's a joy and a freedom that I had not experienced. I mean, not ultimate joy and freedom, but around my finances, that's why I jumped into this, because I want people to experience that same thing. Now, when you jump over to, okay, so what does it mean to impact invest? How do you do that? The first thing is you need to define the financial return. You've already heard about this. It can be concessionary. It can be market rate. You really want to be with somebody who's intentional about this impact. They are not just, it still is impactful, even if they're not meaning to. But for us, we want managers who are specifically setting goals. They're measuring them, and then they're reporting out on it. It's not just a hope it works. It's no, this is intention in addition to the return, what we're trying to drive or trying to change, whether that's spiritual, whether it's environmental, whether it's social. And so here's just a broad based, I'm going to give you some themes. And then what I'm going to do is go through really quick. And I just want to paint a picture of some actual investment opportunities, because often what we find is that in the absence of information, people just don't even know how to dream about this stuff. So under real assets, I'll just name a couple: workforce housing, which I'll talk on today, renewable energy, organic farming, just to name a few. On the private equity side, you have sustainable farming, values-based VC, so sovereigns, which I think a number of you probably are familiar with. That's what they do. Actually, sustainable fashion is another big one. And again, it depends where your value set and what's important to you. And then on the private credit side, which is lending money to non-public companies. And these can be larger companies or they can be very small companies. And you can see some of the themes there as well. Remember, these are investments. And so there are risks with these investments. And I would just say high level, there's loss of capital. There's loss of all your capital in theory, depending on how much risk you're taking. Most of these are illiquid. And so you just need to be mindful that underwrite these as an investment, which is exactly how we view it. So we're going to fly through these fairly quickly, but I just want to paint a picture of like real funds, and I'm not going to give the specifics of them, that are out there generating real returns today. So a huge need in the United States, and frankly, the world, is affordable housing. And I could get into the technicalities, but I'll just say this. In America alone, there are about 7 million units short for affordable housing. So that's units. So then obviously that's more people now. That's 7 million people who do not have access to safe, clean homes. And here I'm really speaking more so about multifamily. And so, you look at different scripture where it says, take care of those who are in need, the poor and the needy. What a better way than to provide this for individuals? Obviously, housing is foundational to so many things. In fact, there's plenty of studies that will show the zip code that you grow up in, the house that you grow up in, or your shelter has a huge determination of how you end up in the future. So that is one, for example, that typically generates cash flow and has a total return aspect to it as well. So private credit, this is a very big theme, but we work with a fund, and you can just see where it says the sectors up there. This would be a well-diversified fund that is loaning capital to small to mid-sized companies in Latin America, Southeast Asia, emerging Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, across all different types of, whether it's agriculture, whether it's fashion, but what you'll find here is that it's estimated that capital for these types of businesses, there's over $4 trillion shortfall in capital for them. So you can be a part of that solution for them, which obviously has a huge impact on the quality of life, job, and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, you can generate a very competitive return as well. So that's an example of another investment that will be out there. So here's another unique one. And actually what you'll see is David, who's going to speak later. In fact, it's funny, all of our worlds overlap. There are some similarities to what he does here. And actually my brother's in Africa and we've got a fund. And so a lot of collaboration here. But there's over 2 billion individuals in the world who do not have access to the financial systems. It creates a myriad of problems. And so this is a fund specifically focused on loaning capital to what are called SMEs, which are micro, small to medium enterprises. And so this picture up there, this motorbike, there's an example where you can invest in a company that loans to these entrepreneurs, these motorbikes. Turns out that they can double their income and they actually can own the motorbike, which traditionally they would be lending from the local tribe leader, as an example. This is an $80 million fund. This is real capital that's going into this fund. It is led by $28 million of institutional capital. And so you actually have the opportunity to come alongside of real solid investors who also have a heart for impact. So full transparency, my brother and I are working on this. My brother lives in Rwanda. David, I think you said you talked to my brother. I think you said today. Just a few bullet points here. 600 million Africans do not have access to power. That's like almost twice the size or the amount of people here in America. When you don't have access to power, the impact on housing, health, business, spiritual development is massive. And so we are creating a fund in small scale renewable energy where you go out and I'll give you this picture in front of you. Is called run of the river hydropower. You divert a portion of the river for only a short period of time. It ends up coming back in the river. It ends up running through those tubes that you can see, goes through turbines and creates electricity. And then the last one is just to even give you a snippet of what's out there. We're working with a group right now. The average assisted living facility across the United States costs a residence about $4,700 a month. There's a huge swath of the population that cannot afford that. And so this is a group who is developing affordable seniors housing, which means that the average resident can pay between $2,700 and $3,000, which opens up a huge swath of the population that can be served. All of these have the ability to have heavy faith integration. Some of them aren't specifically Christian, but would align with the value set. So anyways, that's just a smattering of what is out there. There's plenty more, but it's really exciting. And I would imagine as you start investing in this, there'll be a joy and freedom, not only to look at the returns, but also the impact that you have. So with that, I want to turn it over to David Sims. David is, all you got to go do is look at his resume. He was wired for business, went to Harvard Business School. Actually, I just learned this today, but I had heard this before. He was hired by Mitt Romney back in the day and worked at Bain Capital. For the last 30 years, it sounds like the culmination of his career is he really has his passion to follow God's calling to go to Africa and to help lift Africans out of poverty through job creation and that kind of stuff. So, David, welcome.
Jeff, thank you much. Tim, thanks as well. And Jeff Johns, it's a joy to be with you all today. We'll go to the slide. And what I want to do is ask us, why are we here today? And I'll actually make this very personal. Why are you here today? Why did you carve out an hour of your time to learn about this thing what we call faith-driven impact investing? And my guess is that someplace at the core, there's something around that parable of the talents. You've heard all of us reference it, that the parable of the talents really talks about whatever the 5-talent servant that invested to maximize the return for the kingdom, and with the desire of hearing, well done, good and faithful servant. I think that at our core, all of us that are believers would really like to hear that well done, good and faithful servant. And if you keep reading in Matthew 25, the very next parable is talking about whatever you've done for the least of these, you've done for me. So maybe some of you are here just thinking about, what can I really be doing for the least of these and using my talents? But how do I do that? So let me tell you a little bit about how the Lord has led our journey at Talented. We provide a way for you to invest in a portfolio of faith-driven growth stage businesses that create jobs to bring hope and transform lives. And that's a mouthful, but it really means that we've found a way to create a pool of really exciting companies, and we'll be talking about just a few of those in a minute. When I go to the least of these part of the parables, and we look at what you heard Jeff say, you've also heard Jeff Johns say this, the global situation in Africa and the developing world is really severe in many ways, but there are 2 billion people that live without good jobs on less than $3 a day. And so if you really want to understand what the least of these look like, we can take you to show you what communities in these countries look like. Those of us that have been wired for business just don't believe that fundamentally giving is a way to solve poverty and economic development in a scalable and sustainable way. So we need a different way to do that. So let me look at the next slide and explain to you a way that we think is the kingdom-minded way of using our talents well. And that is, again, I'm going to concentrate on Africa. That's where we've been focused to launch talent. And it's hard for most of us to believe that in Africa, there will be 450 million people entering the workforce in the next 15 years. I'm going to say that number again because most people can't imagine. 450 million entering. Forget the number of people that may be in poverty today. That's the magnitude of the population bulge coming through the pipeline in Africa. The World Bank and others would tell us that at most they can foresee 100 million real jobs, that is with a paycheck coming from an employer. So that would leave 350 million, or the population of the US, or underemployed. And you think about poverty, human trafficking, refugee flight, civil strife, terrorism, all of the things that can happen from hopelessness and lack of jobs, poverty. And you heard Jeff mention this, that the truth is, well, what does it take to actually create jobs? It's these small, medium enterprises. That 80% of all new jobs that will be created are likely to be created in small, medium enterprises, businesses between 10 and 250 employees. But the capital available to companies in the developing world, in Africa, is something between $1 and $4 trillion of missing capital. This thing called the missing middle, because traditional finance, risk-adjusted market rate returns, putting money into these kind of businesses in Africa typically doesn't flow at scale. So that's what we're trying to address through Talented. Let me just, I don't have the time today to go through sort of all of the stories. These are just 4 of the companies that we have in our portfolio at Talented. We started in Burundi, a country that was dramatically impacted by the genocide that hit Rwanda next door, and Burundi. Have a fabulous company there that is bringing hope and life to smallholder farmers, already serving almost 3,000 of them. The second company here, Educori Montessori School, you wouldn't know it, but that picture of the girl in that photo is an 11-year-old, started there at 18 months, and she's just published her first book in the midst of the pandemic in Kenya, in Nairobi, chain of 5 schools, looking to double that over the coming years. I'm going to skip Kentegra for 1 minute and just say Masaka Creamery attracted us. It's in Rwanda. Half of their 41 employees are deaf. Everybody in the company speaks sign language, but it's a phenomenal business. They're sourcing milk from 2,000 dairy farmers on their way to tripling that business in the coming years. Good financial business, great social impact, and delivering a product, yogurt, full of protein for a country where 1/3 of all youth are protein deficient, so mental and physically stunted. And Kentegra, I'll just end with this particular story. Those of you on at the beginning saw the Duncan video, the story of transformation in a farmer's life who was living in a mud hut and couldn't educate his kids, feed them well, house them well, or really give them hope for a future. he's connected now into the global economies by growing flowers. Those flowers behind the gal in the upper part of that photo are a chrysanthemum type flower that creates an organic pesticide. That business is already serving over 3,000 farmers. They've trained 8,000. We together believe they could reach 100,000 farmers. Every one of those farmers can make $80 to $100 per month in income from growing an acre of flowers. That's the equivalent of a minimum wage job, and they're partnering with a World Vision spinoff, Root to Fruit, to bring biblical worldview into these farming communities, not just economic vitality. So just as we've all talked about today, we'd like to remind everyone that your donor-advised fund capital can be invested to achieve kingdom impact with financial, spiritual, and social returns. You can use charitable donations and your mind as a for-profit investor. Bring the two together in any of the things that the three of us have talked about today. So you can invest, you can donate, you can deliver huge kingdom impact through the resources that the Lord has entrusted you with. For those of us old enough to have seen Jimmy Stewart in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, we just all encourage you to find a way to use your talents to serve the least of these with the goal of hearing, well done, good and faithful servant. Tim, back over to you.
Thanks, David. Well, I think you'd all agree, for those that have joined a world-class group of speakers, thank you so much for each of y'all just inputting into this conversation. So a couple data points that struck me as I was listening. Number one, this will probably be a generational idea. If we think about what's happening here in the last decade, where you're using capital to invest in the good, the true, and the beautiful, that was just not even on the radar really 20, 30 years ago, and the way the capital markets are developing. So this is like a whole new world. Secondly, I would just say we purposely hit you with a lot of different ideas here, right? So there was US-based firms, there's non-US-based firms, there's different parts of the capital stack. Like, we did that on purpose because we want you to realize this is a well-developed universe that's been created, and it's becoming more and more efficient. I want to give you 4 thoughts. If you've got, we purposely didn't put this up on a slide, but 4 thoughts for conclusions, and then I want to give you 4 ideas on a way forward, and then we're going to hit a couple of questions that have started to come in. So if you have one, go ahead and shoot that through the chat feature. Number 1, ESG and impact investing is not one concept, right? It's just easy to think that you just have to have the right tool or the right investment. This is a bigger category. It has different meaning for passive and active investors across public and private markets, right? So understand this isn't just one concept. This is a broad area. Okay, number 2, avoid getting stuck. I think because it can be complicated, it can feel like there's a lot, we freeze, right? So avoid thinking of this as a singular act. Find a useful entry point, right? So perhaps you have a private equity distribution and you've got some capital and you think, well, I want to put my toe in the water, right? That could be a catalyst for you. Number 3, integrate your impact investing and ESG investing into your conventional asset management, right? So normally, I know we've got some advisors on the call today. Folks are doing asset allocations, right? You can start to think through, how much of my portfolio should I allocate to impact? You could do that on the taxable or the non-taxable side. I know for Michelle and I, we just actually invested in a Talented fund last month, and that's our second impact investment. We did one from Creation Capital, which is Chicago-based, that just was mark to market, and that's done very well. So we are just starting to get into it, and it's been good. So think of it in the context of conventional asset management. 4th, market returns are possible, right? So when we started 8, 9, 10 years ago, there was a lot of concessionary returns. You're getting the 2s and the 3% when really you're taking risk where you should be getting 7s, 8s, and 10s. That's started to come to the middle now. So you can go out, find dedicated investment professionals, connect with the folks you just heard about, talk to your wealth advisors who have deep domain expertise. This is an area that is really, has got a lot of potential, obviously, from what you've heard. And then the other thing I would add, just in that, every community has their own local context. And so for us, affordable housing is a huge challenge, right? You heard about that from Jeff. So think about how this could potentially not only affect those in Africa and around the world, but perhaps there's impact projects locally that you'd be interested in. So then secondly, so that's the first four. I don't have a 2x2, I have a 4x4. So 4 ideas, right? It's not one concept. Don't get stuck. Think of it in the normal asset allocation, and then market rates are possible. And then the second 4 are really practical ways you can start to get involved, right? Number one, if you have a separately managed account with NCF and your donor advised fund, you can work directly through those wealth managers into their systems, right? Goldman Sachs, Raymond James, they all have impact investments. Secondly, you can invest into these kinds of impact funds directly through NCF, like I did with Talenton, right? So David Sims, their product is on our platform. You can do it that way. And we heard about that from David. Thirdly, if you have a deal and you are interested in figuring out how to engage that with your donor advised fund, and it's not on our platform, that's where Impact Foundation and Jeff Johns' teams comes in, and they can help you figure out if it's impact or not, and then how we would potentially create an arrangement. And then the last one is bring a deal. If you're out there and you're wondering, hey, I've got this great idea, but I don't quite know if it's impact or not. You just heard Jeff Schaefer talk about 4 or 5 different things he's working on. Bring a deal, and either Jeff Schaefer can vet it, Jeff Johns can vet it, we can vet it, and we'll decide if that's a way that you could invest through your donor advised fund. Or maybe it's something you do on the taxable side. So I know I went quick there, but 4 thoughts as conclusions, and then 4 ways forward if you practically want to invest. So what I want to do, because I really love to show this video, the last 4 or 5 minutes, is to punch through a couple of questions. And the first one I have come through, this is for Jeff Johns. We have one for each of you. So let's go ahead and, so Jeff, the question is, can Impact Foundation help me find an impact fund to invest in? Or do I need to have an investment idea before I reach out to you?
Yeah, so we do have, and we see a ton of deals. So sometimes families come to us and say, look, I got $100,000. I think I want to dip my toe in this water and maybe do a couple $50,000 investments or what have you. So I'll ask you, what country are you interested in? What kind of impact are you and your wife and your kids excited about? And those kind of things. And what kind of return parameters are you looking for? And then we will introduce you based on kind of that impact to some entrepreneurs that you may want to invest in.
Great. And then Jeff Schaefer, this one is for you. If you could walk us through, if folks are wanting to put their toe in the water, how do you think about the size, so the dollar amount, and then also maybe the percentage of portfolio that you would start to think about with regards to impact, both on the taxable and non-taxable side?
Yeah. So again, I'm gonna make this actually pretty simple. Assuming that you can generate market rate returns, just think about it like you would your traditional investing. So you may find a real estate deal that also is affordable housing. And so don't confuse it and go, but just go, hey, what is it in this example? How much real estate should I have in my portfolio? And I mean, I could give you general guidelines, but honestly, that's a personal decision. I would say probably the best way for me to answer this is, if you are investing in public securities like ESG type stuff, you're going to probably have more of that in your portfolio because it's liquid. And so on the private side, which is more of what we're talking about, you're going to see generally 10 to 20% of a portfolio. And obviously, if you have a lot of money, some people do more than that. It's really about liquidity. Clearly, you got to think about risk, but I actually think the bigger issue is liquidity.
Great, thanks. And then David, I'm gonna send this one to you. So the question is, for funds being held for long-term commitments, right? So they may have, something they're wanting to do 3, 5, 7 years out. Can funds be invested in these types of programs or initiatives and then liquidated when we need them for other uses? So maybe talk a bit through liquidity. That's a great question. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and thanks for the question. And actually, thanks to Tim's colleagues at NCF Corporate. When we created Talenton, we knew that was a question on the minds of many donor advised fund account holders. And we set up Talenton specifically with an unusual structure. It's a 4-year, what's called a lockup legally, 4-year period. And then the donor investor can redeem the funds anytime after 6 months. So if you don't need the money for 10 years, you can let it run for 10 years and do great kingdom impact. If you need to get it out in order to meet other charitable commitments, you can do so at the 4-year point. I think what we would all agree with is don't let it just sit there in cash, not generating some good for the kingdom. That's what I'd really encourage you to think about. There's another part of that parable, the talents, that also had the one talent guy. I don't think any of us want to be burying our talents in the ground.
Yeah, and to that question, so my wife and I had a liquidity event about 24 months ago, and we tithed on it, and we had capital sitting there. It was mentioned earlier, charitable wealth. We had some charitable wealth, and we knew we weren't going to deploy it all probably for 3 or 4 years. And so that's why we started to look at some of these. So if you have a liquidity event and there's capital there, this could be a way for you to bridge between when you actually give it away to, invest in it in the meantime. So a couple of things I heard that I think are noteworthy. Number one, money markets are at historic lows. We'll see, where interest rates go. But if you do have capital and you're sitting on it, that's a data point. Also, I want to just mention the 2021 CARES Act, right? So this was legislation that came through last spring. It enables you to give up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. So if you are looking to create, if you will, a charitable bank, this could be a good year, especially as tax rates will probably go up where you can start to look at having capital to give away. My wife and I think of capital, Michelle and I, like whether it's taxable or non-taxable, it's just our capital to deploy as stewards. We don't really think of it that differently. And then the other piece is just obviously our NCF Orlando team, we have a team of 5 of us here, and we're just here to serve you. So if you have any questions, if you want us to connect you to Jeff, or David, we'd be happy to do that. I don't see any more questions, but those 3 were great. And so with that, what I really like to do, unless we have any final thoughts from the panel, we have a 5-minute or so video. And this is coming from the Masaka Creamery that David mentioned. And so about 2,000 dairy farmers involved in this, 41 full-time jobs in Rwanda. So I hope you have a great day. Thanks so much. Anything?
Hey, Tim.
Yes.
Yeah, before you go there, Faith-Driven Investor. So Faith-Driven Investor was launched by Henry Kaestner. There is a ton of resources, 140, 150 podcasts. Every single one of them will encourage you on your journey. If you're thinking about how do you learn to be a faith-driven investor.org, faith-drivenentrepreneur.org as well. And they really do a good job with answering a lot of the questions that you guys might have. And so they're firmly NCF and planted in exactly, our ecosystem. And so that's a really good resource to check out.
That's a great ad. And we'll, for those of you that we saw that were on today, we will shoot you that link along with other information from this today. So with that, I think, Joel, we're going to dish to you, and we're going to finish out with this video, and hope you have a great rest of the Wednesday. Thanks for joining us today.
Masaka Creamery is a dairy processing company in Rwanda. It was established in 2015, late 2015, as a vehicle for launching high-quality dairy creamery in Rwanda. We operate in the free economic zone. We moved from Masaka area, and now, since 2017, we are operating in the free economic zone. We are 100% dairy. All our products that we make come from our local Rwandan milk, from our local farmers. We work with more than 2,000 farmers of Rwanda who supply us with high-quality milk. When we get this milk, it goes through a number of stages to be tested. We do this because we want our end products to meet the demands and the requirements of our customers. It's our desire to produce high-quality products, and in the market, we are known as a company that produces high-quality, yummy dairy products.
So when you come to Masaka, as you go in, we always make sure that our product is safe. One of the ways to make sure that everyone is wearing the proper PPEs, which is personal protective equipment or apparatus. At the entrance, we have the foot bath, which is basically used for disinfecting the boots. We know the boots are clean, but we want to be extra sure. So we disinfect them. There's chemical inside here. Masaka products are 100% safe. We have assurance for that. We have several certifications to show for that. We have S-Mark for all our products. We are getting FDA, which is a new standard just to make sure that the products are safe. We are also working towards getting HACCP. HACCP is not a mandatory certification, but for us, because we want to give our customers that assurance that our products are safe, then we are going for it, and we're almost getting it. The other thing, our products are quality products. We don't add any water. We don't do any preservatives in our products. So when you buy our products, you're buying natural products, made naturally. To ensure that the product is actually, we are not reducing any nutritional value in our products. So you're buying a safe product, you're buying a quality product, 100% assurance of that.
Urumva buri produit sinagenda ndetaya ngo nkubwire ngo dukora ibi ku munsi gusa urumva iyo proportion y'amata bituma dukora ibintu byinshi pe ku buryo utugannye wese ntacyo yabura. Dukora yaourt, dukora ikivuguto, dukora amavuta y'inka, dukora ibyitwa Greek yogurt, sinzi uko mu Rwanda tubizi ariko nayo n'ubundi bwoko bwa yaourt, dukora fresh cream, dukora sour cream, tukanakora mascarpone cheese. Umwihariko wacu dufite amaproduit twintroduije mu Rwanda bitewe nuko twabonaga ko hari abantu bakunda ibintu biva ku mata ariko bakagira ikibazo wenda cy'umutima, bakagira ikibazo cy'amadiabete n'ibiki. Twintroduije produit zabafasha ntibave ku bintu bitkomoka ku mata ariko bakanakomeza kubona izindi produit zabafasha kandi zongera ubuzima bwabo, bifasha ku buzima bwabo.
We started, like any other company, we started low with a few people, like about 8 people, but right now as I speak we are between 40 and 45, but mainly youth, Rwandan youth, under the age of 30. And the other thing, as part of our social responsibility, we also work with people with hearing impairment. As you've seen, most of our staff members in our production are people living with hearing impairment.
Wadushaka dukorera mu mujyi wa Kigali hose, ngubu dusigaye dukorera no muri Rubavu ku bantu bari mu majyaruguru no mu burengerazuba, ni Rubavu turiyo, i Musanze, ni Rulindo, hanyuma mu majyepfo turi Huye na Muhanga no mu Ruhango, hanyuma mu burengerazuba mu burasirazuba turi Rwamagana, Kayonza no mu Mutara. Abadukeneye mwadukura kuri 0789911244, wanatwandikira kuri email info@masakacreamery.com. hanyuma wanatwandikira ku mbuga nkoranyambaga zacu ariyo Masaka Creamery kuri Facebook, Twitter cyangwa Instagram.